This is Inside the Wolf's Den, an entrepreneurial journey with Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkel.
Welcome back to Inside the Wolf's Den with your host, Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkel. Today we have Deb Newell with us in the house. How are you, Deb?
I'm great. How are you guys?
We're awesome. Thank you so much for joining us today. So just a quick bio on Deb. Deb Newell, a true fixer, entrepreneur, and strategic leader and consultant in the property management industry. Deb holds an MBA with concentrations in leadership and marketing and is in the final stretch of her dissertation for her PhD in industrial and organizational psychology. Along with multiple professional designations, including NPM, RMP, and Realtor, with over 25 years of hands-on experience, Deb specializes in helping single-family and multifamily businesses, software companies, and leadership teams overcome challenges and optimize their operations through expert consulting. Her expertise spans people, processes, technology, marketing, asset management, mergers and acquisitions, growth, focusing on addressing the root cause of business pain points rather than just symptoms. A former investor, Deb started renovating properties in 1998, eventually managing thousands of rental units, founding and selling property management companies, and running her own maintenance and renovation firm. Deb's leadership extends her service with NARPM at both the local and national levels, where she held key roles including vice chair and chair. She's passionate about driving results, streamlining operations, and creating a sustainable growth for her clients. Again, Deb, this is quite a resume here. I have actually been wanting to have you on the podcast for quite some time now. Industry expert, and here we are. So why don't you kind of break it down? How did it all start in the property management industry?
Certainly. Well, I think my entry into the property management industry was like somewhat unconventional and unintentional. It was really sparked by my own personal interest of real estate investing. And really, truth be told, I wanted to get out of debt. And so I kind of dived into really flipping in the beginning. And so we kind of partnered with somebody else, a friend that we knew. He kind of put forth the capital, and we did all of the, sweat equity and sold that first one, split the proceeds, and then it kind of just really escalated from there. We just, found more and bought more and started then holding on to them. And really just not with the intent ever to build a business. This was really just to create long-term assets and through improvement. And really what started off as this hobby that I just enjoyed doing really evolved into this full-fledged business operation. But I had recognized some operational inefficiencies and service gaps in the industry. And really, I didn't know that this was a thing to manage rental properties. And so I just really saw it as an opportunity to professionalize it. And it kind of, once was a side hustle, kind of became this full-fledged business without, again, that wasn't really my intent. It fell into it.
Yeah.
That's pretty awesome. I had never known that about you, Deb. So thanks for sharing that.
And we have a similar experience. We kind of fell into property management, but we started with flipping homes, and then when the market shifted in 2008, we went into turnkey real estate, and then which we were selling properties as a turnkey rental, and then we needed somebody to manage it, so we decided to open our own management company. So it kind of fell in through the back door, the same as or just fell into the business. But talk about some of the challenges you faced early on in growing your property management business, and I'm sure there were many, but is there a couple big ones that maybe you could talk about how you overcame those?
Yeah, I mean, I made a lot of mistakes. I will be the first to admit I didn't know what I was doing. And I think one of the biggest things is I was really cheap. We did this for our own properties, and we got to about 35 doors. And as we were buying more, it was really across that buying table where the realtor was like, hey, I know somebody. Can you help manage for them? And honestly, I was like, well, how hard can it be? And little did I know, it's different when you manage for others than it is for your own properties. So that was probably maybe mistake number one, is that I said I would do it for others. But it was basically what kind of evolved and what turned into some of those early on challenges was property management is inherently complex, and it's balancing owners' expectations, tenant needs, the legality, the compliance, operational workflows, like all of that. I had no blueprint at all, no idea or understanding really what to do. I just did what a lot of people do. They just dive right in head first without a thought to building any sort of a strategy or a foundation and managing as a reactive property management manager would, right? So rent's due. What do I have to do? Sometimes I had to drive to the property to go pick up rent, maintenance requests, like anything that came in, that's how I managed. It wasn't with the fourth thought of like having to pre-plan or strategize for anything. And I faced challenges as I had to then hiring the right people, building that infrastructure from scratch, because I didn't even know of a consultant or a coach in the industry, in property management that could help. So it was also staying ahead of regulatory changes, like being on top of all of those things. This was in Minneapolis, and so there is a lot of rental licensing done by city, St. Paul, Minneapolis, Eagan, St. Louis Park, like there's so many different cities, and they all had different regulations, and you have to remember all of those things. So staying ahead of that. And then where am I going to document that? Choosing my software, that was a huge hurdle. I chose something I think called Tenant something. It's not even around anymore. I can't even remember the name of it. But it was, where do you kind of like document these things? How do you do it? I think but I will tell you, the greatest challenge I know that I faced for me personally was actually learning how to lead and transitioning from doing the work myself and then building a team. I mean, I'll be the first to admit I was a terrible manager. I didn't know what it meant to manage others and hold people accountable, have a list of expectations, and make sure those were all aligned.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that. I do have a lot of validation calls for property management companies, mainly in real property management. I always tell them, look, if you're looking to start a property management company, I think you need to own rental property first, so you can decide for yourself, being able to do all of it, right? Because you name it, there's so much in property management. So one question I have for you, Deb, is how did your experience as a property investor influence your approach to consulting and leadership in the industry?
Well, I think you said it. It's being an owner first. Now, and for a lot of people that might not be the case, so they maybe can't have a rental property, but I think understanding the nuances of that life cycle of property management, for me, I did enjoy actually being kind of that boots on the ground and learning things that way. I showed properties. I would put my kids in the back. I had 2 young sons at the time, like 4 and 5 years old.
Yeah.
I stuck them in a car, went on a showing, did everything you shouldn't do. I locked them in the car and went and did a showing and came back out and they were still there. I went back. It's just, it was a different time and you did what you had to do, but doing a move out walkthrough and again, figuring out what is a rent ready expectation. So my approach, I think now to consulting is I have this deep respect for both the asset and the human capital behind it.
Yeah.
So I understand risk tolerance, the cash flow constraints, the desire for predictability and that investors crave. I get all of that. This perspective gives me, I think, just a new way of helping with operational excellence and helping prioritize transparency, financial performance. There was a lot of times where I didn't make money and I didn't know why I wasn't making money. I had put that human capital ahead of everything else without realizing that was actually not a good business decision. And realizing that I needed to really document and streamline my workflows better to be more efficient, which actually then would help run a more lean environment internally.
Yeah.
Love that.
I'm gonna throw you a curveball already. But so Joni and I had a call about an hour ago with it's a lender that's taking back, it's 160 units and they're taking back, and we're pitching to manage these properties. But the very astute owner of this lending company, very, very financially smart, and he's based out of California, but it's interesting how that dynamic, he felt like, I'm curious how you would sell this or how you would overcome this objections. So he felt like we were, there was that balance between our pricing for property management and then him as a investor and financially responsible for this capital that had been lent to this property. But it could be the same as if somebody was acquiring a new multifamily property. But he felt like we were sucking a little bit too much of the money out and not respecting the money that it takes, that they're lending out, that I guess is needed first to own the property and to acquire the property. We weren't respecting that. Is that how you put it? Yeah. Respecting, them, I guess, in other words, but he used it as he made us focus more on the money part of it because we were charging too much. And so I was curious what your thoughts, being that you've probably seen both sides. What, because because he brought in Walmart as kind of his thing, and then of course he goes to like nickels and dimes. So I think in his mind, we're supposed to make nickel and dimes and pick up the nickel and dimes along the way, and that's good enough.
Okay.
And that's good enough. And I was trying to tell him, like, you're asking us to step into a foreclosed buildings and do a hostile takeover and take over this whole project, knowing that in a couple of years from now, you fully have the intent to sell it, and he's being very transparent about that. So we did do a percentage on the sale of the property in our agreement because it's going to be more shorter term, but he didn't like our fees.
He wanted a discount. He wanted a discount. Okay,
yeah.
So I think respecting an owner obviously starts with understanding their perspective. So what are they most looking for, which is transparency and alignment with their investment goals. So how do you approach that conversations with owners who want that strategic partnership? It means, you've listened, you got to listen to their concerns, ask what their questions are, what their expectations are, but helping them understand that it's not just the what, but the why behind the decisions and fees that that you're charging. Like when you have to defend your fees, it's hard to justify that. And, but I can also see it as an opportunity to demonstrate your value. So you want to say, we want to be strategically aligned. We want to, form this partnership with you along the way. But property management isn't a commodity. It's a professional service that mitigates risks and preserves the asset value, ensures compliance, and enhances ROI. He won't see that right away, but you have to walk owners through that fee structure in the context of those outcomes. What does this service protect them from? What operational burdens does it remove? What long-term financial value does it have? So you have to differentiate between the price and the cost. And, a low fee provider is going to appear cheaper. It's like you get what you pay for. Right. And there's the hidden costs of like core tenant screening or maintenance delays or even legal missteps, the regulations that are out there. So that can often seem like, an upfront savings to somebody, but you want to obviously respect the owner and their asset and include them in getting them everything else that comes along with property management. They need to understand why these things, it's not just collecting rent. It's not just answering the phone for a maintenance request. It's the coordination. So I'm always about explaining the why behind we do that and building that strategic partnership. But if they don't listen or they seem to ignore that, they're not going to be a partner in that alliance going forward.
Agreed.
Because what happens is when that first big charge comes in, whatever it is, they're going to be upset. And they're going to, once again, you're not aligned with our financial performance of this property, but there's some things that you just can't avoid because you have a legal responsibility to the tenant and to the asset and to the owner. And so they need to understand that relationship and what that all means. And in the end, you guys are absorbing probably almost all of the risk.
Correct.
Yes, an owner can get sued, but you get sued first. And so you are trying to mitigate in as much of that as possible.
Yeah.
100%.
And I like that you put presenting and going over the why and breaking down, because there was a misstep. Joni and I were talking about it at lunch before we jumped on this podcast, was that the conversation didn't go great. And so we were like, what could we have done better? And we realized, because he was under a time crunch, it goes to auction tomorrow. And so we're under a time crunch. And so we just got him everything we could just quickly. And if we had more time, we would have presented our proposal and presented our.
What's interesting that you say that, though, is I would have taken the time. Sometimes we can't meet their timeline, and that's okay. And I don't know anybody else that could have. He's that now he just raises more questions and he's probably just more frustrated. But I would have paused and I would have said, this is something we can go through, but we don't have the time today if you need this by tomorrow.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
So it was good.
That's great feedback. Yeah. And I mean, at the end of the day, if it's like you mentioned, if we're not aligned, if it's not a fit, it's not a fit, right?
Yeah, it isn't. But sometimes it's interesting. Sometimes saying no makes you more like, it's that exclusivity that they want, right? They're like, but I really want you. Well, it's no today. Might be yes tomorrow when I have more time, but it's no today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
That's a great idea. I kind of like going back with that.
Yeah.
Because he has the power to push the auction back, a month or so that.
Look how that,
So
could have waited.
Yeah. So, but
Patience. Patience.
One question
Sense of urgency is not your problem.
No. Joni mentioned in your bio, you're known as the fixer and, kind of a problem solver. So I would love to hear, as you're consulting any type of business, but it could be property management. How do you what are some of the steps you do in diagnosing some of the issues within the business and go about solving some of that? So is there a strategic approach that you do?
Yes, there is actually. I mean, I guess being a fixer means I approach challenges systematically, right? I take a diagnostic approach, much like an accountant or a mechanic or anybody like that. I start with the discovery. I interview the team. I map out the workflows. I analyze the data. I call it like looking under the hood of the car. Anything and everything that's going on with the business, I look at everything holistically. And because it's not just one thing. A lot of times people will come to me and say, my maintenance, I need help with maintenance, or my team, I'm struggling with my team. Everybody seems overwhelmed. That's the most famous one. Everybody's overwhelmed. But that's just the symptom. I'm looking for the root cause. And a lot of it, it's not just, what they struggle with is not just one single issue, but it's due to a lot of misaligned systems or issues, poor communication, unclear roles, outdated tech, a lack of accountability. So I come in to untangle those complexities, find the root causes, and build that structure that's both scalable and sustainable. People find themselves in these positions where they've kind of plateaued, and they're like, in order to get here, I sort of know what to do, but I can't figure out how to get there. Or I need to hire somebody else, but I can't afford it. Maybe they don't need to hire somebody else. But again, it's looking at what they have today and the workflows. And I'm looking for patterns, and I'm breaking down the communication, the redundancy and the inefficiencies. And I align all of my findings with the business goals, which is important to hopefully that they have, and then to ensure that the strategy is rooted in what success looks like for that specific organization.
Love that. Can you share? I would love for you to. I love success stories. I love hearing success stories. Give me a success story of maybe you going into property management company and what you've been able to do for them.
Well, I'll tell you, I'll keep it kind of generic in what I see most.
Okay.
So like, okay. I have a couple favorites, but here's one. A really common challenge that I see is a breakdown in internal communication. Oftentimes when I'm talking, like I said, my process is to talk to the team and to interview the key members of the team. And often the number one thing is communication. It's like a lack of, it's stemming from really unclear leadership structures or misaligned titles. And that's where I see companies assign inflated titles to individuals. You're laughing.
I laugh because
Because we've all done
In
that.
an attempt to kind of elevate this perceived, I'm like kind of like this perceived authority or maturity of the business, right? Like
Yep.
we want to appear bigger than we really are. So you're director of like, strategic planning and growth. I don't know. I'm making it up, but but really what this does is it leads to confusion, misplaced expectations, a lack of true accountability. And so when when leadership lacks both that clarity and capacity, teams really become fragmented and communication fails and performance suffers. And this is where people are like, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So that's almost like one of the most common things I see is the communication, which really stems from what does the organizational structure look like, the roles and such, which then kind of lead into this absence of documented processes. A lot of times it's companies rely heavily on that tribal knowledge within people, right? So I hired my first employee and they've kind of come up with me through the ranks, so to speak, and they just, everything's in their head, everything's in my head. And so, but that breaks down during turnover when I have to hire people. And so helping clients transition from this reactive, undocumented procedures into more of a fully mapped, tech-enabled process framework is really what we focus on.
I mean, you're speaking. We made all those things. Exactly.
I know,
We laugh
right?
because yes, and then it's really hard to untangle all that you created with those fancy
that's the
titles.
Other thing. So when I do go in, and by the way, I'm not even talking about large companies. These are smaller companies, like 400 doors or less, maybe even 700 doors or less, and they're, when it hurts both the employee and the employer, right? So if I've made somebody a director of property management or a director of operations, my point is a director of operations is your number two, usually. Like they need to know how to run the company in your absence. It doesn't mean just handling an escalated issue on the phone. It means I know to pull a report, to look for a certain KPI, to really dig in, to understand the trend, to understand the financial, the whole thing, the budget, everything, all of it. And what I find is that usually is never the case. The other part is if you've hired somebody and you're giving them a title, when they're disgruntled, they'll start Googling, going to Indeed or LinkedIn and saying, oh, well, this director of operations makes
X
six
amount.
figures.
Yes.
And I only make 5 figures and it's a low 5 figure, or I perceive so you now have a whole misalignment of like goals and expectations with your employees. And it really hurts them. So if they put on their LinkedIn profile, I am a director of operations, and then they leave you and then think that they're qualified for that position going forward, they're going to be sorely mistaken when they are not qualified and they can't even meet the minimum job requirements that company would expect from them.
Absolutely. Just curious how you...
do you have a headache now, Shawn?
Yeah, I've done that too many times. How have you, in the past, how have you like redone? I'm just curious. What was your approach?
Do that?
Yeah, because
So
it's even though
that's a hard one.
You might pay the person the same amount of money, but just changing their title from like director of operations to...
I have to tell you, titles mean a lot to people and employees. They mean a lot. And this is the hardest thing I have to... And some companies just don't want to do it. They don't want to hurt their employees' feelings. They don't want to... if I lose them, I can't run this company without them. We don't ever want to put ourselves in that position. It's first off your company, and we're not catering the company built around employees. And that can also be a mistake. Employees are valuable, yes, and we need them, but no one company should be because of one or two or three employees. Like that doesn't make it. And so if you're so worried about hurting their feelings because you're now having to say, you're not really a director, you're really a property manager, then it becomes, do I have to give them put them in line with more of a pay grade? Because the other problem with all of that is you could be hitting your ceiling on what your ability is to pay them increases. And your increase now is only warranted based on the merit and health of the company. And if the company is stagnant and not moving forward in the direction it should be at the hands of a good leader, then you're going to tap them out and they're going to be disgruntled and end up leaving anyway. So it's a really hard thing to figure out. Do I need to let this person go? Do we need to part ways? We've outgrown each other. And that sometimes might be the best thing for both parties. Or do I realign them, but keep their pay the same with the caveat that there's just no increase is going to be happening? They might still be unhappy. I also see a mistake where not a lot of companies don't budget for, here's my salary, here is my bonus structure throughout the year. It might be based off of incentives through KPIs. And then sometimes people have year-end bonuses for just because. And if you don't have that in your budget and then you end up giving a bonus, if it doesn't align or meet, or they don't know what it is, let's say it's 20% of their salary. If they know ahead of time that part of my KPIs and incentives are part of that 20% and the rest of it might just be, productivity and performance part, then at the end of the year, that's understood and that's expected. And you don't always give them 20%, but maybe, they're a portion of that throughout the year. And then there's obviously the economic part of it where you get a raise, CPI and things like that. So because of cost of living, that's different than a bonus or incentives. So you need to make sure that's part of your plan, your budgetary plan for each employee, so that you don't go into it at the end of the year going, gosh, I only gave him $1,000. Maybe I'll just boost him over with 1,000 more. Where's that 1,000 coming from? So you just want to make sure that you know all of that ahead of time. But going back to kind of that question of what do you do? That's the hardest part. It's figuring out, are they still the right fit for your company? And can they take you to that next level? And if you truly believe they can, then we just need to do a realignment, and then they'll be on board with it and they shouldn't be offended by it. But yeah, it might sting for a little bit, but again, what's the vision and are you sharing that vision with them? Oftentimes we make these decisions without sharing the why, even to our own employees, of where we're going and why we're changing this.
Love that. Something that kind of popped in my head, because you don't have an easy job, like going into the companies and, discovering all these things, right? And kind of getting the business owner aligned with what they need to do. Like talk through that process. I know that there's probably a mindset shift of, okay, like we need to get reality to sit in first and then we can go ahead and make changes. But a lot of times I'm sure they're not willing to make those drastic changes right away.
Yeah, it's hard. And it's interesting. I don't think I tell any owner something they innately don't already know, right? Deep down, it's resonating with them because they're like, you're just telling me something I think I already knew, but I just didn't want to hear it out loud. And I'm not only telling them, here's all of my findings and recommendations, I'm building you out the roadmap on this is how we're going to work together to get to this end point. The hardest part for me is when they don't want to make those changes. And I can see how if they did, the impact it would make and what that would look like for their company. But some of them are just, they can't, it is a mindset thing. And again, most people go into this, any industry, starting a business, not with the mindset of, I get to hire employees and manage them. They go into it because they have a passion for something and they want to make a good living. But in order to do that, in order to grow, you can't do it all on your own. So you make your first hire, then your second and your third. And now you're managing a team to help execute your vision, which is what you had in the beginning. And that is hard.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think of, and I'm probably going to get a lot of feedback on this one. Your team is not your family, they're your team. It's hard because your company, it can feel like a family because we are spending so much time together, but your family is truly your family, right? That's you go home to your family. You have a work family, but it's really the team, because you have to be able to also give direction, sometimes put them on a pip, sometimes make some hard decisions, and sometimes point in a direction that they were like, I don't want to add another fee. Why are you doing that? That's not fair to so-and-so, or, you know, this owner will be unhappy. How do I? So they don't know how to overcome those objections, and they're not in the mindset to be able to do that. So we have to make sure our company is composed of people who make a team that we can delegate responsibilities to. Yes, we spend a lot of time together, but they're not our family.
Yeah.
We a couple of years ago we changed that. We had one of our core values had family in it, and so and as we made a conscious effort that, you know, it's fine, I think, when we were smaller, but as we grew, it just like we needed to change that to team. We changed it to team instead of family. Still meant the same, but it was just it. Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
And sometimes I wish we could give our family pips too at home. Corrective. No, just from your perspective, how has the property management industry evolved since you first started your property management company? I'm sure maybe some high level things, just what's some big things that have really changed over the last 10 years?
So I think this industry has undergone a significant professionalism, like a professionalization shift almost, right? So what was once viewed as like mom and pop business has really grown into more sophisticated service model. This is why we see a lot of people wanting to enter into property management. We've seen the rise of tech platforms. There's a lot of that now. Investor-backed like consolidations, we've seen that. But there's also been increasing regulatory scrutiny, which then tells me that, you know, everybody else is also recognizing that this is an industry that they need to pay attention to. So, but client expectations have evolved. They demand more transparency. They want better communication. They want more proactive service. So I think before it was just, you know, it was okay to, as things came in reactively, but now that there's just been a shift, especially economically, people are counting their pennies a little bit more, or some people are just investing in it into a little bit differently. So that's been the biggest shift I've seen.
Yeah. Peter Lohman earlier this week was talking about his new report that came out, and communication, you know, actually picking up the phone and talking to your customer.
Yeah.
That's what people are wanting, right?
Yeah, they are. Even and yet we're in this AI powered, you know, space right now. So yeah.
So on that note, is there any emerging trends or technologies that property managers should pay attention to?
Well, I would say that AI-powered automation. You know, self-showing technology has been around for a little while. Centralizing maintenance coordination, that's kind of been around for a little while. I say a little while, probably within the last 10 years. But, you know, revenue optimization, again, buzzwords, key, you know, KPIs, revenue optimization, like ancillary services. These are all game changers. We've seen it kind of transpire and change our industry. But I think companies also watch how that data is integrated, and business intelligence tools are reshaping some of that decision making in their own business. And so the key is not just about adopting that technology, but integrating it meaningfully into the entire workflow.
Yeah, love that. So Deb, I want to kind of switch gears into talk about leadership a little bit. So I know you've served on NARPM and other organizations, and tell us a little bit about what leadership lessons have you learned, and maybe you could share with other property managers out there.
Well, I don't think this will be a surprise based off what I've already said, but I think the most important leadership lesson I've learned is that people need clarity of purpose, expectations, communication. So, you know, great leaders listen. and they make informed decisions. They build trust over time, and that's sometimes hard to do because it's not overnight. Emotional intelligence is non-negotiable, especially in a people-intensive industry like ours.
Right.
Yeah, that's awesome. We run EOS and in our organizations, and we a lot of times we get asked like what does it do? Like, what is it really doing for your company? And that's really how you explain it. Is its clarity across the whole organization, and then we add it also adds like some guardrails, to keep you all headed towards the same vision, which you mentioned before too. But I think that's really what EOS does within a company. But give me that question.
Yeah, in regards to that also, what strategies would you recommend for property management companies looking to grow and scale?
Kind of like a house, start with a strong foundation, right? So clear roles, defined processes, a tech stack that supports and not overwhelms the business, right? So, look at how much you have in your tech stack, because a lot of people don't really think about it when they add it up. All of that, this will kind of speak more to our industry. It's all how much is that cost per unit, right? So that all adds up. So I think growth without that infrastructure, that's what leads to that burnout and turnover. So you got to build accountability into your culture. You've got to use KPIs as a management tool, and never outgrow your ability to train and lead your team.
Love that.
Which it starts with the owners, right? It's always,
the business starts at the top.
Correct. Yeah. The business is where
it starts at the top, but interesting enough, like I'll work with a lot of multifamily clients, and I always say, yes, it starts with the top. You set the tone, but you can't do it without the on-site team, right? So the on-site team is essential, but you need to understand what they're doing. What is that life cycle that they're doing every single day? So while it starts at the top, you also need the people, on site, boots on the ground and things like that.
Yeah. Deb, like over the last couple of years, I've gotten to know you a little bit more, and you inspire me. You are a giver to this industry, and what motivates you to help others?
I think it's the impact of seeing a company struggle, but then see that transformation, that shift. And I have like one of my favorite stories, like if you want to call it a success story, is I had an individual, she was literally, and she had like 1,000 doors. It wasn't like she didn't, her and her husband built this really well-respected company. And she came to me just like, I'm done. I think with almost the intent of, will you help value the business to sell it? We're done. And when I really dug in deep, part of my valuation process is kind of still doing a deep dive into the company, because I think that's important to still to understand, depending on who's going to buy it, right? What makes everything tick. But I discovered that I think she was done because she was feeling overwhelmed, because she had a really great team. They had a great culture. She was just so much still involved and not delegating as well as she should. So her team felt there was that misalignment. There was a little bit of that communication issue. Could have been a lot worse, but it wasn't. But, we kind of refocused, and the purpose changed and shifted to, here's the valuation. Do you want to sell? To here's some things I think that could actually change and shift your business and make you think about it differently. We added some technology that she hadn't thought of utilizing that really transformed her business, and, building out workflows, building in KPIs, which was actually big, incentivizing the team differently, and getting them kind of more on board with the vision. Now she's like, it's amazing to see where she's gone in like a year and a half, but within 9 months, she already had it was like some crazy number, but almost a 40% margin shift on her profitability. It was just crazy, because she wasn't making the money she could be, but it was because she was just working harder and not smarter and charging for what the value was that they were actually doing.
Wow. And that's a perfect example of why you need a coach and a mentor, right? Because she's so close to it, I'm sure. And we see this all the time with business owners where they are stuck in the weeds of doing it all themselves and they can't seem to get out of it. But when somebody like you comes in to actually show them, they're like, oh, like, wow, I didn't realize that, right? It's crucial to have a coach and mentor along with you.
Yeah, and I believe in that. There's a ripple effect in good leadership and strong operations. It goes down.
Right.
Yeah. If you could go back into your early 20s, what advice would you give yourself? It was just a few years ago.
Become a lawyer like I was. I don't know. What would I have done? What advice? Here's the thing. I think with anybody, it's invest in learning the business, not just doing the business. Remember I told you in the beginning, I was just kind of like doing and not thinking through the methodology of like, why am I doing this and how am I supposed to be doing this? I really do understand the why behind every process. That's so important because you have to get your team on board to understand the why. That's the vision to help you get to there. Don't be afraid to ask questions. I think you said it, Joni, seek mentors. In our industry, there's no shortage of them. So there's a lot of people out there that will gladly give advice. Just make sure it translates into your market and into your business, because every single business I've seen operates just a little bit differently, even though we essentially all do the same thing. Document everything. Again, that tribal knowledge, remember, you want to make sure. But I think success comes from consistency, humility, that willingness to kind of evolve. You have to be agile, and people who don't pivot also remain stagnant and don't grow. And that's important as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
There's so much to offer in this industry. I mean, looking back at when you started in 1998, like we had none of this, right? Like this industry is probably the most giving industry that I've ever seen. Would you agree?
Well, and it evolved into that.
Yeah.
So interestingly enough, it wasn't a very giving or free sharing industry. But again, like Facebook was, I don't even know when Facebook came about, but like, there was no like Facebook groups. There was nothing to like share the wealth, share that knowledge. It was kind of like, I felt like I was on my own little island, every man for himself. And it wasn't until probably around 2005, 2006 that I kind of was like, oh, there's others out there that like go through the same hell I do every single day. Wow, we're best friends. Like it's, and people are willing to kind of, it's like we can commiserate. And like, that's how you sometimes make the best friendships, is you commiserate in the misery of what you're doing. So, there's strength in numbers, definitely. But you just have to be, it's also find your why. Like, why are you doing this? What's going to differentiate you? Because a lot of people want to start in our industry, and it is a profitable and, it's a profitable industry, and there's a lot of business out there. And you could have 5 people in your market and you all do it a little bit different, and you all still could collaborate and share, share that wealth, share that knowledge.
Agreed. Yeah. Great advice there, Deb. So one question that we ask all of our guests on the show is, what is your next? What are you looking to accomplish maybe in the next 5 years or so? Let's give it 3 years. 5 years seems a little long.
Yeah,
3 years.
Over the next few years, obviously I'm focused on, elevating the consulting standards in this industry, but I'm also focused on completing my PhD. So hopefully I'm just on the final stretches of that.
Woo-hoo!
So I'm a little tired, but that's okay.
That's amazing.
What made you what made you get your PhD?
I don't, because after I got my MBA, I'll be honest, my MBA was like eye-opening for me. It literally transformed how I did the consulting, because I was able to really understand and diagnose. I mean, you learn things in an MBA program that I didn't even know I could do in college.
Yeah.
So it was just looking at the business differently, how to, diagnose all of the numbers, the financial piece of it, all of it. It was how to even use Excel better, like just all of these things. It was all part of that program. And I'm like, if that was just that, and that touched on the kind of the operational side, there's this emotional intelligence side of business that I was doing consulting, and it sometimes feels like it's a little bit of therapy. And I don't mean that in a bad way.
Yeah.
I mean it in the sense that people, again, we commiserate and we kind of like over the misery of what our problems are. And I found that as I was doing a lot of reading, a lot of the business books still kind of had this focus of mindset, leadership, all of these things. Like you needed that as part of your core of the business to run. And it just kind of was this natural progression of, okay, I think I need this accreditation, so to speak, to kind of help me get people into that next level and know what I'm actually speaking about. Not just, what AI may tell me or what I read online, but I think there's a lot of empirical knowledge out there, a lot of research that's been done that really in other industries that really go, oh, this could be very beneficial on how we structure a team or how we operate within the team, on how we deal with people. And it's the things like, how am I going to have these hard conversations?
Yeah.
How am I going to manage conflict? These are psychological things that happen in our business, and people need they really need help with that.
Yeah.
So my long-term goal is to build a model that scales, that can drive measurable transformation for a business at a local level.
Wow. Love that.
Yeah. So Deb, we appreciate you sharing today and providing a lot of value. How can listeners connect with you and get a hold of you and say they want more information about your consulting services? How can they reach out?
So my website's pretty easy, propertymanagementconsulting.com. So that's one way to find me, and it's all over. You can schedule a consult. You can, my phone number's on there. It's pretty easy to find me that way. So that's probably the best way to say it.
Awesome.
Awesome. Well, we'll have that all in the show notes, so our listeners can easily find you and schedule those calls, because like I said, Deb, you are an inspiration to me, and I see you firsthand helping others, and thank you for doing that. This industry wouldn't be the same without you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, guys.
Appreciate it. Well, if you like that, please give it a 5-star, and please share it with somebody that you know that needs this. So we appreciate you, and we'll see you all next week.
See you, everyone.
You've been listening to Inside the Wolf's Den, an entrepreneurial journey with Shawn and Joni Wolfswinkel. Tons of entrepreneurial podcasts are out there. Talking. But Joni and Shawn are living it every single day. Their portfolio now includes many franchises and medium-sized businesses. We talk about the trials and motivators of successfully running a business. Join us again soon for another podcast. But until then, reach out on the website at InsideTheWolfsDen.com, on Facebook at Inside the Wolf's Den, on Instagram at Inside the Wolf Den. We'll see you again soon. This is Inside the Wolf's Den. We'll see you next time.